Welcome to the Polygamer podcast, where gaming is for everyone. Join us as we expand the boundaries of the gaming community.
Hello and welcome to the Polygamer podcast, episode number 59 for Wednesday, January 25th, 2017. Happy New Year. Today I have the privilege of speaking with EMiSpicer, video game culture photographer and social media manager for Midboss. Hi, Emmy.
Hello.
How are you today?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
I'm okay, thanks. It's such an honor to finally be chatting with you. I have seen your work being produced in person at GamerX, both West and East. We may have briefly chatted at the West event, but that was years ago. And I also saw you at Indiecade East earlier this year. You certainly are active in the gaming scene.
Yeah, I'm kind of a workaholic. I tend to, if I find out about something, I want to be there. And so I do everything within my power to get to be as many places as I possibly can.
Does it feel like work when you love what you're doing?
I mean, yes. Photography is incredibly physical and tiring, and I'm kind of an overachiever, so I push things really, really far. So it absolutely does feel like work as I'm doing it. And a lot of the times when I'm like really tired, I'll jokingly be like, this is what I like to do. This is what makes me happy, as I'm like tired and stressed. But it's true. It's true. Like, even for how exhausting and stressful it can be, like, I'm always just trying to find the next thing to do.
It takes a lot and it gives a lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you say it's very physical work, what are some of the physical demands? I mean, are you just walking around a showroom floor snapping photos, or is there more to it than that?
So that's the basic of it. But if there's only a showroom floor, that's actually like really ideal. You know what I mean? Like, for a lot of larger events, it means a lot of like running back and forth between spaces and multiple rooms to make sure everything is being covered. Even like, so if there's a conference that only has one track, which means that there's only one group of talks happening. There's not two sets of talks happening simultaneously. It's still a lot of moving around and being on my feet and carrying a piece of equipment that is very large compared to my frame and very heavy. It can be really, really physically exhausting. Yeah, I think that's all there is to it. Well, there's also like the show aspect where I also take photos at music events. And if it's a rowdy band, that also means, you know, moving with the crowd and being physical in that kind of way. You can get pushed around and battered. And some shows I get like particularly good bruises. I tend to take pictures of those and post them on Twitter because I'm a weirdo. But yeah, there's a lot to it.
That's true about the multiple tracks. Whenever we are at an event, you and I'm hopping between tracks, going to different rooms, I can be sure that no matter what room I'm in, no matter how many other rooms there are things going on in, at some point in that hour, you're going to be in the room I'm in because you make it a point to capture everything. No matter how many different places things are happening, you need to be in all those places.
That is correct. Even when there are multiple photographers, I usually try to double or triple up on ensuring everyone is getting documented in a way that both proves that they were present and is favorable to how they want to be presented, which a lot of the times when I work an event for the first time, people will try to tell me that I don't have to do that, but I really can't stop myself from trying.
And since you are invested in putting their best face forward, how do you vet these photos with the people in them? I mean, there really isn't the time or opportunity to check with them before a photo gets published. Granted, they've signed a waiver when they started, but how do you make sure that what you're doing meets with their satisfaction?
That's hard. It's a lot of it is intuition, to be honest. I do my best to post photos that, even if I don't know the person, if I know the person, it's a lot easier because I know more about how they prefer to be represented and it's easier to adapt to their needs. But when it comes to people I don't know, I kind of just have to guess and hope for the best. And if they do ask for something to be taken down, or if they're uncomfortable with it or find it unflattering, I always do. Like that's a major priority for me. Photography is an inherently intrusive practice, and there's a lot of strange entitlement that goes along with photography. And to a point, I get it, because sometimes my motivations will not align with those of a subject. But that's not, I feel like it's really selfish of me to assert that over other people, even if I feel differently than the subject. I think photography should be about making people feel good about themselves. Like, a good picture is really, really important and valuable. And I wouldn't want I wouldn't want to feel that way myself. You know what I mean? Like, have something up there that I don't like how it represents me, and then have somebody resist respecting like my desire to have it go away. So I try to treat others with that courtesy with my work.
That's a very empathetic approach, and I'm sure that they really appreciate that.
I hope so.
So there's a lot more about your photography aspects I want to learn in this podcast, but let's back up and talk about how you got started in this, both in photography generally and then specifically being a photographer of very specific scenes, video game and music. What got you into photography?
So when I was in college, my roommate's partner was in a band, and I tried to support the partner in the band as much as I could. That's just how I am. And eventually it got to the point where they made it to the finals in a battle of the bands, and they were playing in a pretty decent New York venue called Webster Hall. And I went out to support, and I had a 2-megapixel Kodak point and shoot. And I took lots of pictures of my friends. I don't really remember what compelled me to do so, but I did. I took photos of them performing, and I had no talent for photography that I was aware of. A lot of the photography I'd been exposed to was kind of, how do I phrase this? Like artistic-based photography, and more not so much documentarian. Like, there was a focus, or not a focus, like a purpose to it, like a vision, and a lot of it was controlled, and I didn't really have that kind of creativity. But when I took pictures of my friend's band, I liked them. I thought the photos were interesting to look at. I thought they were composed well, and I decided I wanted to keep doing that. And so then the 2-megapixel camera broke. And so for my first couple of years as a music photographer, I was borrowing other people's point and shoot cameras and bringing them to shows with me, until finally a boyfriend bought me my own camera. And then I kept doing that for a while. And then my mom bought me my first DSLR. This is actually a good segue. It all kind of like runs together. And so I had that DSLR for about a year, and I experimented with it, but I was so insecure about what the photos could potentially look like that I didn't edit a single one. Which brings me to the summer of 2010. It was August. Scott Pilgrim had just come out. Anamanaguchi played a free show at Brooklyn Bowl. And I had a friend, Mike Goodman, who is a chiptune visualist who produces work under the name DIY Destruction, who had been encouraging me to go to chip shows for a really long time. And he invited me to something called Pulsewave, which is a monthly chiptune showcase in New York City. It's the longest running chiptune showcase of its kind. And I went to that first show and met somebody who was aspiring to be a games journalist. And they brought me to a Baby Castles show in, I think it was September. And that was my first exposure to the indie game community. I had never seen anything like it. I had never seen anything like Baby Castles. And I had always been a big fan of games and technology. And I also did a lot of work in activist spaces and was really interested in things like co-ops and collectives, but I had never really found a spot where all those things came together. And I found that in 2010 Silent Barn era baby castles. And I just kind of dove in head first. And a lot of my early work was published with this, person who was aspiring to be a games journalist. And they would they were like my point of entry. They brought me to a lot of games events. And as we drifted apart, I had kind of built my own space and kept going and kept learning about more games things and kept going to more games things. I hadn't really set out to be a games photographer. I just brought my camera with me to that Baby Castles show to practice. And I wanted to learn how to be better. And I just kept going. And after a point, it stopped being something I was doing circumstantially and became something that I was doing on purpose. And now here we are 6 years later, and I'm still doing it.
Wow, that's amazing.
Thank you.
6 years, wow.
Yeah.
You said you'd never been to a Baby Castles event before. What is Baby Castles for those who aren't in New York City?
Oh, so Baby Castles in its present form is a video game art collective that has a gallery on 14th Street in New York City that showcases games using the vocabulary of a art gallery. The games, Baby Castles has existed in several forms. It's been kind of a pop-up thing where people would show up and present games in funny cabinets and throw strange parties. A lot of the time there was music and sculptural work involved. The goal was to give indie game makers a way to showcase their creations that they might not necessarily have access to, since a lot of how this works is digital. And it created a physical space for people to get together, enjoy games, enjoy each other, have a party, have a good time. And it was really cool.
Oh, that does sound like a lot of fun. We have a lot of indie game development here in Boston, Massachusetts, but nothing quite on that sort of exhibition format, which I can't imagine anything in my own experience that is comparable to what Baby Castle sounds like.
Yeah, it's pretty special. There are a lot of people who have taken the vocabulary that I don't know if Baby Castle started it because, I wasn't around to see things earlier. I do know Baby Castles was very strongly influenced by the Montreal collective Kokoromi, but I don't know enough about games history to know if anyone else was doing this earlier than that. But I do know lots of other groups cite Baby Castles as a inspiration for how they show indie games in party settings.
I can see how music photography would work. Even though music is a oral medium, it's still very visual when it's performed. People on stage with instruments, even especially with chiptune and the music and the lights, how they're synchronized. With video games, though, many people may imagine that as just being people standing around staring at a television holding controllers. How is video gaming a medium that is represented in photography? How do you capture that?
I think part of it has to do with the nature of what I'm documenting, because that's, what you just described is certainly a way that video game interaction happens, right? Like that's the stereotype. And there's been a lot of work around different kinds of video game environments. Like there are people who over the years who have documented arcades. There are amazing photographers in the competitive gaming space that are, doing a similar thing to what I'm doing, in that they're showing the different ways that games are being played that isn't the dystopian stereotype that a lot of people want to associate it with. And for me particularly, I really want to show that there's much more to games than that. And indie spaces, well, there are some times where people zone out and get really absorbed and make what a lot of people will call video game face, where they seem kind of glossed over and immersed. There are a lot of vibrant, active, fun, happy, or even just emotive spaces, you know what I mean? And I think using events as what I want to document helps that a lot, because an event isn't just somebody in their living room. Event isn't someone just kind of closing themselves off to what's around them. An event is something where people specifically go to interact with others. And so there's a lot more opportunities to show games as a point of connection rather than a point of isolation. And that's part of what inspires me about how I document these games. I want to show, when the games are being shown, I want to show that people love them. And sometimes that means biding my time and getting like the right moment. But yeah, there's a lot more to be shown than just people kind of zoned out and looking unexpressive.
How many photos do you have to take at an event to capture that essence? What's your camera roll look like when you're done with a weekend?
It can be thousands of photos, but that also has to do with how I choose to shoot. I take a lot of throwaway photos. There are other photographers who are way more exact and precise, and I find them to be truly inspiring because I cannot do that at all. But I usually end up with, depending on what kind of event it is, especially if it's multiple days, thousands of photos that I sift through to find the one that I actually like. I also don't delete anything. There are other photographers who will delete as they go, and I choose not to do that.
So even after you get the photos back onto your workstation and you're going through them to find the best shots, even then you're not deleting?
That is correct.
What does your storage solution look like?
It's intense. I'm walking around with like several terabytes of hard drives at all times, and then I have even more at home. I'm definitely a digital hoarder. I really can't even try to pretend like I'm not. I am absolutely a digital hoarder.
I mean, wow, you must have some sort of a RAID array or time machine backups up the wazoo. I can't imagine how many external hard drives you must need to store all this.
I have a lot, and I do need to, I need an extra layer of backups, to be honest with you. I am planning to do that. It's just a matter of sitting down and breaking my internet connection for an extended period of time, which is going to be the worst, but it needs to happen.
So you're looking at a cloud-based backup like CrashPlan or something?
Yeah, I'm planning on using Amazon Prime's solution, actually.
Oh, that's a great idea.
And they offer unlimited raw upload, so it's just like perfect. It's exactly what I need.
And for data that is more archival in purpose, stuff that you're not going to be accessing frequently, their rates are really affordable.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, great idea. What about when you're on site? Are you walking around with, well, what size SD card do you use and how many of them do you have with you?
I don't know the exact size, but I'm pretty sure I have like 100 gigs. Is that a T? I don't know. It's a lot. I have at least, I think I have like 5 or 6 cards on me at all times. I've got cards that are big enough now that I haven't maxed them out. I haven't maxed out a card in a long time, but I do have extras just in case that circumstance ever comes up.
No, it's a good idea to always have backups. I always carry around an extra battery for my DSLR, and the only time my battery has ever run out and I've had to use the backup, it's only happened once in 6 years, but that one time was at Machu Picchu.
Oh gosh.
Right. If that had been the one place I would not have been able to take photos, I would have been very sad.
Yeah. I started carrying an extra battery after Blip Tokyo 2012. I was in Japan for the final Blip Festival, which was the chiptune festival up until that point. And I had charged my battery and put it back in the camera, but the battery fell out and I didn't notice. And then I got all the way to the venue, and it was a commute. I got to the venue and discovered the battery wasn't in there and had to borrow someone else's camera in order to take the photos. And it was great because it was great for them. It was that journalist. Even though we had stopped working together at that point, I was like, I'll just give you the photos I take. Just please let me use your camera. And they agreed. So they saved my ass and I helped them. So it worked out. But after that, I got a second battery, and then eventually a second charger to carry around in the camera bag with me, because I've just funny things happen, and as I got more experienced, I knew how to compensate for them better.
Good idea. Is there a lot of competition in that space? Are there other video game culture photographers you're working with or against? Or when this need comes up, do people just say, oh, call EMiSpicer, she's the person who does this?
There are other games photographers. There isn't anyone who does quite exactly what I do, but there are lots of other wonderful photographers in the space. I personally don't see it as competition. I'm actually happier when there are more photographers at an event with me, because it ensures that there's more even and better coverage of an event. So like I mentioned earlier, if I miss something, somebody else will get it. So I don't really feel a need to be competitive with other photographers in the space. The only thing I don't appreciate is there's this thing that happens I call being geared, where a photographer will approach me and try to assess me based on my equipment. And I hate that practice so much. If somebody wants to talk about gear because they want to share tips or pointers, or, like I have this and I figured out this that made my photos look great, so I want to teach you also, like, that's one thing. But your gear helps for sure, but the quality of your work is not going to necessarily be affected by your gear. A good photo can be taken with an iPhone just as easily as it can be taken with a DSLR. And I do not like using the amount of money you spend on your equipment as a gatekeeping mechanism. That's my one thing. But there are other great photographers. One photographer that I really adore is Miriam Pilgrim. She is based out of Canada. She does truly beautiful portraits of game developers and games community members. She's extremely talented. There's also Izzy Gramp, who is based out of Australia. She's done amazing work, both portrait and kind of environmental photography. She is an incredible editor in a way that I am nowhere close to achieving on her level. There's also Robert Paul, who exists in the competitive game space. Absolutely inspirational. I really dream of being on his level. And there are tons of other photographers. I work with a wonderful group of people. We call ourselves Mediatron. We're part of the MagFest department. I have a great team as a part of GamerX. There are tons of other games photographers, and the way I see it is I don't think anyone else should have to struggle and push as hard as I did to make a space within this community. And so everything that I've achieved, if I meet somebody who wants to do something similar, I just boost them and help them get on teams with me. Yeah, I don't see any reason to compete. There's no reason why more of us can't exist. I can't be everywhere. And I want other people to succeed too.
Well, that's very generous. And it's true, you can't be everywhere because there are a lot of events. You are in New York City where there's a ton of stuff happening. And then there are things happening, as you said, in Austin, Texas, San Diego, San Francisco, Boston. Have you been to Boston?
I have been to Boston. I haven't been there in some time. There aren't as many events there that align with what I want to document. There are a lot of smaller, interesting events that I wish I had time to fit in and the budget to fit in, but I just don't. I do help out with a demo party in Boston, though, called At Party. So I was up in Boston back in June, but I don't go up there as often as I would like.
Sure, I've been to At Party. I've backed it on Kickstarter, Val Grimm's project, and I also spoke at it a couple years ago.
Oh, whoa! I only just recently got involved, but that could have been a good crossover for us to meet. That's too bad.
We might never have known, though.
That's true.
We both would have been busy doing our own things. So you've been to Blipfest in Japan, Indiecade on the West Coast, GamerX on both the West Coast and East Coast, many, many more events that we haven't even named yet. What are some of your favorite events to photograph in the gaming space?
So for games events specifically, GamerX is my favorite con. I feel really most events that I cover at this point, I am lucky enough to be able to work directly with them. So I promise I'm not just saying the stuff because I work with these events. I feel really lucky that I have the opportunity to get to work with all my favorite events. But GamerX is absolutely my favorite con that I've ever been to. I started going to cons when I was 16 years old and kind of fell out of love with them because I didn't enjoy the community or the culture around them. But GamerX is just a warm, welcoming, happy place. It's one of the only places I can think of where when complete strangers come up to me, I actually want to talk to them and enjoy talking to them and don't feel defensive or uncomfortable. Additionally, I'm lucky enough to be a co-organizer for the conference Different Games, which happens in New York, and I'm a member of the Different Games Collective. And I went to that event for the first time in, I forget if it was 2011 or 2012 now, but it was my first academic conference. I don't exist in academia. I have no point of reference for that sort of thing, so it was my first academic conference, and I loved it. I loved how gentle it was. I loved the topics of conversation. I loved how the speakers communicated with the audience. There were breaks for food. I'd never seen anything like it. And it was all about taking care of yourself. And it was absolutely pivotal for me. And getting to work with that conference has been something that I've been very proud of over the years. And finally, I really, really love Fantastic Arcade in Austin, Texas. It's such a magical event. There is nothing quite like it. It's really freeform and funny and intimate, and it's long and it's tiring. It's 4 days of like 12 to 13 hours of programming. It's single track though. And just getting to go there, I've gone twice now, and it's very much a high priority for me in regards to gaming events.
So these are your favorite events to attend, and you say that you get to work with them. Does that mean that they are hiring you directly to take photos for use in their marketing and publicity?
Some of that, because a lot of the work that I do is in marginalized spaces that don't necessarily have large budgets, like they're just existing by the skin of their teeth. Some of this work is volunteered. I am employed by Midboss, which is the parent company that owns GamerX. So I am, in fact, paid for that. But for events, particularly like Different Games Collective, nobody who puts on events within Different Games makes a profit for what they do. So a lot of the times, in order to produce the work that I do, I am dependent on my Patreon in order to make that possible. Here's the shameless plug. I'm on Patreon as Ugly Machine, and as a result, my patrons over there get to see photos before anyone else does. The thing about making up your project is that there aren't always great avenues for support for you. I've started applying for grants, but a lot of art spaces still don't really know what to do with games, and because I'm doing documentarian style photography as opposed to editorial style, I don't necessarily know where to look yet. I'm also a self-taught photographer, so finding resources that are available to professional arts photographers is a little bit more challenging for me, but I'm trying. I'm doing my best. I'm going to do this no matter what, you know what I mean? I can't imagine not doing it.
This is something you're obviously very passionate about, not only the industry and the art, but also your own work at it. You are wanting to do it for a living. You have your Patreon. You wrote that after having several shitty part-time jobs, you're just done with traditional employment. But the Patreon is not yet at a livable wage. So if I may ask, if it's relevant, what is it that you do?
So for a little bit, I was just straight up unemployed and just working as hard as I could, thanks to the support of my now ex-boyfriend, Matt Newman, who I couldn't have done this without. I tried to really make it happen because I could not live that way anymore. So that's when I started applying for grants, and I put a lot of work into that. And then I came up with this ridiculous project that I called Photo Hell. This happened due to two musician friends of mine, the composers Chip Zil and Darius Carlin. We were in San Francisco for GDC, and they were encouraging me to come back to Japan to see the successor to Blip Festival, Square Sounds. And I realized if I saved up enough of my Patreon money that I could, in fact, go to Tokyo. Then I think I had previously realized, remembering the order of this is a little difficult at this point. I think I had previously realized that with the timing of both that year's GamerX West and Indiecade West, it didn't make sense for me to go back and forth from California to New York. I'm very sensitive to time zone changes, and I realized it made more sense for me to just hang out in California for as much of that month as I possibly could, so that way I would be in better sync with the demands of Pacific Standard Time. And then I realized that Fantastic Arcade and GamerX were happening in the same week, and I, like an idiot, decided to do both. So I realized in order to do all of those things, the most logical method would be to go from Tokyo to Austin to San Francisco to LA. And that's what I did. When I was in Tokyo, by coincidence, members of the Mid-Boss team were also there to go to Tokyo Game Show to show off 2064 read-only memories. Since I was, a GamerX member of the Mid-Boss team, I asked if I could stay with them at the Airbnb. And while I was waiting for them to get there, I was dealing with jet lag, and I caught on Twitter the president of GamerX, Tony Roca, saying, "We still need a social media person." And I went, "What about me?" And so that's how I got my job working with Mid-Boss, which truly is a dream job. Like there's no other way to talk about it except to call it a dream job. And I feel really lucky that I get to be employed by such an incredible company. It turned out that making the most reckless decision of my life had the best payoff, both emotionally and for my bank account. So I do have a part-time job again. I'm actually due for a Patreon overhaul. I plan on doing that. I do that yearly around my birthday. So that's coming around March 18th. There's going to be a Patreon yearly overhaul again. So you heard it here first. But that text will be updated to reflect the changes that have happened since I relaunched it last year.
Now, I saw a mention on your Patreon, and you just mentioned it earlier in the show, that you just completed a project called Photo Hell. Is that right? Yes,
that is correct.
You said it was one of the most difficult projects you've ever attempted. What is Photo Hell?
So Photo Hell was documenting Square Sounds Tokyo, Fantastic Arcade, GamerX 4, and Indiecade 2016. It was 2 months of continuous traveling, 4 events, documenting two of which were, as I mentioned, in the same week. It was intense. There was a lot of flying around and uncertainty, but it happened. It's done. And the other thing I did was I brought 10 disposable cameras with me on the trip, and instead of using my cell phone to take pictures of things that were happening around me, I used disposable cameras.
And why did you do that?
Okay. So over the summer was Otakon, an anime convention that happens in the Baltimore area. It was the last year for at least a period of time that it would be happening in the Baltimore Convention Center. As I mentioned previously, I used to go to cons when I was a kid and kind of fell out of love with them, and Otakon was one of them. Otakon was the last con that I went to where I decided this isn't for me, I'm not having fun, I don't want to do this anymore. By coincidence, not so besides it being the last time it was going to be held in this convention center that I had gone to as a kid, it was the 10-year anniversary of me saying, fuck it, I'm done. And so I decided I wanted to go back. And like I said, I took pictures all the time when I was young, but I was using a film camera point and shoot because that was what was available to me when I was young. And so I wanted to go back and take pictures around the con using that same kind of vocabulary, but using the visual language of myself as a now professional photographer. So I bought a couple disposable cameras and I went back, and I really, really loved doing it. And so I decided, so when I went to Tokyo the first time, I had a good job that paid me well. And so I bought a lot of Polaroid film with me. I bought about $100 worth of Polaroid film and brought it with me to do fruits-inspired street fashion photography. And I went around Harajuku and took Polaroids of the well-dressed people that I found there that I thought were interesting. And I knew I wouldn't be able to afford to do that again. So instead, I brought all those disposable cameras, which gave me a lot more film to work with. A pack of Polaroid film is only 8 exposures, but a single disposable camera is 27. So I thought it would be interesting to do something similar to the Otakon project, but in regards to this photo hell project. It was kind of a spontaneous decision, and the results are excellent. Actually, when I got them, I'm going to be doing an exhibition of my early Baby Castles work in Melbourne, Australia, at SK Bar. It opens on February 3rd, and I'll actually be bringing prints of the film photography that I took during Photo Hell, and they'll be on sale for $5 each. And if you see me around, chances are I have those film photos on me, so you can just give me $5 and I'll give you a random one.
If you don't handle changes in time zones well, then Australia's going to be brutal.
Oh my gosh, I'm so worried. I figured out how to do Japan. The first time I went to Japan, my goof is that I say that I went full Bill Murray. I'm a big fan of the film Lost in Translation, and if you're familiar with it, Bill Murray's character does not sleep like at all while he was there. And the first time I went to Tokyo, I barely slept. So I was prepared this time. I brought melatonin. I worked really hard to acclimate myself. And based on my success in Tokyo, I'm hoping I can have a similar success when I get to Melbourne. But I'm definitely kind of nervous.
It's especially confusing on the way back because you cross the international date line, so you actually land back in California before you left Australia.
I think it's the same day. Yeah.
The same day, yeah, but when I flew from Melbourne to California, I left Melbourne at 8 a.m. and I landed in California at 6 a.m. the same day.
I want to see. I have it written down. I want to see what my thing is. Yeah, so I leave at 11:15 a.m. and then I land at 6:30 a.m., I think.
Right, so you landed before you left.
Oh gosh, I didn't even realize that. Oh no. That's going to be funny.
Speaking of Bill Murray, that will be Groundhog Day. You'll have lived the same hours over again.
Oh, no! I had no idea. That's absurd. Oh, my gosh. I'm totally going to credit you when I play that up big time.
Enjoy. But you'll have plenty of time to research another project you mentioned on Patreon. What is Games on Planes?
Oh, Games on Planes is... okay, there's a lot of background to this. So I'm a big Twitter user. I'm very active on Twitter. You can follow me at Ugly Machine. And something that I started doing a couple of years ago, it wasn't a planned project like a lot of the things that I come up with, but I would, again with my ex-boyfriend, we would get drunk and watch really terrible movies, particularly the Michael Bay Transformers series. I'm kind of OCD, and once I start watching something, I have to watch it until it's over. So whether it's canceled or just completed, I watch all of it, no matter what, no matter how much I don't enjoy it, I watch all of it. That applied to Michael Bay's Transformers. I saw the first one when it first came out, and so as they've continued to come out, I've kept watching them. And this particularly became noticeable around the time that I watched Transformers 4. I had accrued a decent amount of following on Twitter, and I got really drunk and watched Transformers 4 and tweeted my experience of it. I also made vines of particularly good moments, and it went over really, really well. And so I've kept doing that. I watched, when the new Star Wars came out, I decided I wanted to rewatch all the other Star Wars that had happened before that. I tweeted that. I had never seen the Mad Max movies before, so I watched all of them, including Fury Road, and I tweeted them. And so I kind of wanted to do something in the same spirit in regards to games. And so what I do is when I fly, I play a game on mobile, and I write notes down and I take screen caps, and it's supposed to emulate the experience of me live tweeting something. And it's just, all in one go. It's obviously not a live tweet. It will never be live. But yeah, so I collect them up and I make kind of like a small reaction-y based post of my experiences playing games while I'm in an airplane. I can't do anything else. I'm really bad at making time to play games. Like a lot of people in the games industry, I'm too busy working to be able to play the games. But in the airplane, there's no internet, and if there is, it's usually too expensive for me to purchase. It's just the perfect time for me to just actually devote time. I said time like 8 times, but I can devote time to actually playing a game. And yeah, I thought it would be a nice way to reward my backers. It ties in with my projects I already do, and I don't know. I thought it would be nice. And I do plan to, I guess I don't know if I've said this or written this anywhere, but I do plan to bundle up all the Games on Planes episodes from 2016 and publish them as a zine publicly. So that will be coming in the upcoming months. So keep an eye out for that.
Oh, that would be fun. I do look forward to that.
Oh, thank you.
And I can totally appreciate how not having Wi-Fi on a plane is a blessing. It's usually when I catch up not only on some Steam games that don't require connectivity, but also my email, because I download all my email locally, and then I just write all the replies, and then when I land and reconnect to Wi-Fi, I just suddenly have 50 messages outgoing that all get sent at once. It's a great opportunity to achieve that inbox zero.
Sweet. That sounds awesome.
And it ties in well with your Patreon, where if you make $350 a month, of which you're currently making $250, that guarantees one plane ticket a month. And so people who are supporting you toward that goal are getting something directly from you buying that plane ticket. You're getting these games on planes. What are some of the other goals you have on Patreon?
I also have one for $1,200, which will be, this one needs to be reworked also, but it would facilitate me being able to pay my bills. And then finally, a $2,000 thing, which is basically a livable amount of money, which I have not seen in a long time. But yeah, and these are all things that need to be reworked.
Well, it's a great opportunity coming up on March 18th.
Yeah, please support me with your money. I'll give you photos in return.
Yay. If I may ask, what have you found works on Patreon? Because there are a lot of people out there who would love to either make a living income or just make a little bit of money on the side on a regular, ongoing, reliable basis through Patreon, unlike Kickstarter, which is a one-time project-based thing. So what have you found works to get those 47 patrons that you have right now, or what do you think you might try to drive that number up?
Certainly, I've noticed that the more you talk about your Patreon, the more likely you are to gain new subscribers. I've been on Patreon since its very early days. I think I was on it within its first year of launch, but I'm not positive on that. I have noticed a direct correlation in outside followers to the number of supporters you have. I've noticed for every 1,000 Twitter followers you have, you can expect to make about $100. To get about $1,000 a month, you need to have somewhere around 15K Twitter followers. But the more you talk about your Patreon, the more likely you are able to get more subscribers. I've also noticed big milestones tend to drive up supporter count. So like the first time I realized that I really needed to get out of my job and relaunch my Patreon for the first time, I got a surge. The second time I relaunched it and was like, look, I really want to quit my job. Please help me. That helped. And then when I actually quit, that also drove things up. Photo hell drove things up. So anything that's major and puts a sort of sense of urgency on the people who are familiar with your work helps out like a lot. And then other times just producing work that people are actually interested in. So like going to a new event and having taken pictures of particular people and letting them know that this is how you facilitate that will usually result in more people subscribing and patronizing you.
So it's a lot of work. You can't just put this page up and wait for the cash to roll in.
That, in my experience, that is the case, but I'm also working on a smaller scale. People with larger audiences have a much easier go of it. And the nice thing about Patreon that I've found is that while I personally like putting a lot of work into making Blind an active space, there are a lot of people out there who are just happy to be supporting you. So even if you have a difficult time and your output is a little bit lower than it used to be, a lot of the time supporters on Patreon are people who just genuinely love you and want to see you succeed. So even if your output diminishes a little bit, they will still continue to give you their money on a regular basis and really not feel sad about it. That's something I learned from the Baby Castles Kickstarter that they did to open the show paper. It was a pop-up gallery in Times Square. And it took them a long time to fulfill the rewards. And when I was involved in Baby Castles, one of the first things I did as a member of that collective was to help fulfill the outstanding Kickstarter rewards. And we were nervous when we reached out to people, but the majority of the time people said, hey, you did what you set out to do. I was just happy to get to help you do it. And I've found that to be the case largely with Patreon as well.
I have found that a lot of people are very well-intentioned when it comes to things like that. For example, the feminist deck that Kiva Bay was doing on Kickstarter, she encountered some challenges with that, and everybody was just super supportive. They were saying, I'm not supporting the project, I'm supporting the artist.
Oh, that's so wonderful.
Yeah. Well, I guess it depends a lot on what kind of work you're doing. I'm sure that, for example, the developers of No Man's Sky, not that they were on crowdfunding, but they had the best of intentions as well, and they didn't really get the respect that they deserved for the product that they delivered, in my opinion. But for smaller things where it's much more community-based, where people are more likely to know you or at least recognize that you are an underdog, I think Kickstarter and Patreon, you tend to attract a pretty supportive following.
I agree. I absolutely agree.
We've talked about your photography and your social media and your Patreon. We briefly mentioned the fact that you are the social media manager for Mid-Boss Games, which is just a dream come true. They not only put on the Gamer X event that you attend, but this week they launched the PS4 version of their game Read Only Memories. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, we've been working really hard on getting the new update, which is titled 2064 Read Only Memories, out for everyone to play, and it's finally come out. It's been really great. While I wasn't directly involved in the game development, I did spend a lot of time working very hard to support it, so it feels really good. This is the first game that I've been directly involved in. I just said I wasn't directly involved in producing, but you know what I mean. This is the first game that I've been able to support as a part of a team, and I'm really proud that it was 2064.
So I don't want to go too in-depth into what that game is, because I've had Matt Kahn on the show multiple times, in fact, to talk about read-only memories. But briefly, it is a point-and-click adventure game in the style of the old Shadowgate or Deja Vu, for example, and players can choose their own pronouns and also meet a cast of characters that is quite diverse. But what is new that we haven't talked about on the show yet is what is updated for this PS4 version and also for all versions that the game is now available for. Can you briefly outline some of the major changes?
Oh, yeah, of course. There's a full cast of voice acting now. Many of the puzzles have been improved upon. There have been changes to the story as well. Lots of really good, fun stuff that people are noticing, which feels really great, and commenting on how much they like the improvements to the game.
Yeah, I was looking at the cast of actors you hired, and there are some pretty notable names on there. But I was surprised to find that one of them is actually right here in Boston, and it just got announced that we'll be doing a PAX East panel together, that being Mr. Jonathan Holmes of Destructoid.
Yeah, he is somebody that I don't know in person yet, but we've become friendly through Twitter, and he's really great. So, lucky you getting to be on a panel with him.
Yeah, lucky me. I just met him coincidentally at an indie game barbecue last summer. And when he mentioned his name, it didn't ring a bell. But then when he said that he's on Twitter as Tron Knotts, Knotts, I was like, oh my God, I follow you. You're amazing. I love you.
Oh, that's so good.
It was just there was a disconnect between the online identity and the in-person individual. And once I made the connection, I was like, oh wow, I'm so lucky to be meeting you. And so I put together a panel about games journalism, invited him and Susan Arndt to be on the panel, and they both accepted, and PAX accepted. So I'm really fortunate that now I can go from fanboying over him at a barbecue to actually sitting on stage with him.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. I hope it gets recorded. I would love to see that.
Yeah, if all the panelists are copacetic with that, I'll definitely make sure that that happens. And in the meantime, I can listen to his dulcet tones in 2064.
Yeah, he plays a lot of characters too.
Oh, great. I didn't realize that he plays more than one. Excellent. I'll have to see if I can spot him.
Good luck.
Thanks. But this podcast is not about Mr. Jonathan Holmes. It's about you. And you are on Twitter and Patreon, as you mentioned, under the name Ugly Machine. Where does that name come from? Why aren't you EMiSpicer on Twitter and Patreon?
Surprisingly, I don't get asked this question very often. I used to, oh gosh, I don't know where to start with this. But when I was in high school, I really wanted to be in a band. And the band name that I came up with was Ugly Machine. It was in reference to this Japanese musician who I really love named Hide, who his tour DVD was called Ugly Pink Machine. And so I dropped pink and made the branding for this imaginary band I had come up with be blue, which was my favorite color, and pink in tribute to this musician. But I couldn't talk anyone to being in a band with me. And so I just kind of adopted it as like my name for all the creative works that I did. I used to draw in like an illustrative way, and I used to write fiction, and I wanted I had a website for my illustration that I called White Crayon, and the early days of the layout for that involved a little cartoon me drawing on a white piece of paper with a white crayon. I thought it was funny. I really like these little contradictory kind of names, or names that I perceived as being contradictory. I had a forum on my website called Burnt Coffee because I thought that idea was really funny. I didn't understand how you could burn coffee, and so I thought it was, I don't know. Anyway, so the parent thing was supposed to be Ugly Machine. And I had a different handle that I used on the internet in my early days. And as I aged, I decided to just drop that one and use the Ugly Machine as the primary one. And actually, the photography project, when I first started it, wasn't called Ugly Machine. It was called Front Row Photography when I was first doing exclusively concert photography. And I used to have a subdomain on my website. Everything was supposed to be on the primary domain, Ugly Machine, and then have like a series of subdomains. So my early photography was being posted to frontrow.uglymachine.net. I used to code my own websites from scratch. But yeah, I've just kind of kept the Ugly Machine thing as part of my creative identity since I think I was either 17 or 18 years old when I came up with it, and I'm going to be 31 in March. So
wow.
It's not something I really want to let go of. Yeah, it's been a really long time.
It's been with you almost half your life.
Yeah, it has.
That's amazing. You mentioned that you used to code your own websites, and I have a question about websites, which is, not being a photographer, I don't know, where do people who shoot really good photos put their photos online? Like, I'm a peon, I put my stuff on either Facebook or Flickr, but that's not really a medium designed for high quality image viewing experiences. What do people in your industry use?
So I'm not a good person to answer that because, again, I am self-taught and kind of make things up as I go along. But it's really hard. Sharing photography is incredibly difficult. There is Instagram, but that's not like a good, like, so that's good for visibility and social, but it is not good as a long-term solution to hosting a bunch of photographs. And part of that has to do with the fact that it is connected to Facebook, which is horrific for using images. They both steal and sell photos that people upload. So you should never put anything that is important to you at one, a high resolution, and two, unwatermarked. And that goes for Instagram also. Like if you are working as a photographer and you're posting your work there, your work should always be sized for web and watermarked. So that way people have a harder time. Like it's not impossible, but it's harder for them to steal and reproduce it without your consent. I have I do cross post to things like Tumblr and Twitter as well, just for increased visibility. And I feel very strongly about very in-depth Flickr archives, but that's very difficult and very time consuming. But so I haven't been able to work on my Flickr archive in a number of years now. It stops very abruptly at March of 2013. That's where my Flickr archive cuts off. But I think it's a very important resource to have. It's just not a very good visibility one. Your photos aren't going to get seen on Flickr. It's not a social space. I know there was a time where it was, but it simply is not. So it's difficult. It's really difficult to point something out as like a one-stop solution for showcasing your work. But I think this becomes like a greater conversation about what the current state of digital sharing is like. That sort of thing doesn't really exist anymore. In order to get your work seen, you have to be putting it a variety of places and hoping for the best. Unless you're, incredibly successful, you have to do a lot of work to get the stuff you're producing to be seen. And I don't know what the solution is anymore. I mean, like, even just thinking about writing, right? You write a piece and maybe you're posting it on a professional news website, or maybe you're not. Maybe you're posting it on a personal blog. And then what even is your personal blog? Is it a WordPress? Is it a Tumblr? Is it Medium? Is it a PDF that you've uploaded to Gumroad? And then where are you putting it so other people are saying it? You have to cross-post it to Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and like just anything you can possibly do to make sure eyes are getting on it. The idea of a self-contained network that serves a lot of people just doesn't exist anymore, which is why I kind of am inspired to do an anachronism and go back to self-created websites. And I would really love to see people create tools so that way we aren't dependent on corporations anymore. Like the resources exist. It's so much easier than it ever has been. I would love to see that, but who knows? this is going in a weird place.
No, I completely empathize, especially with the copyright issues. I put only a very limited number of any photos that I take onto Facebook because I recognize that I'm signing away my exclusive rights to them when I put them on Facebook. So I put a representative sampling of the album, and then I put in the album description, for more photos from this event, click here, and then it goes to my own WordPress site.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, granted, I still need to think about watermarking or resolution even when I put it on my own site, because there's nothing to stop somebody from just downloading that image and uploading it somewhere else. And I have found my photos elsewhere, not necessarily by people who are being malicious or filthy pirates, but just people who think everything on the internet is free and that they should be able to reference it. And a lot of us do that every day on Twitter. We want an image to go with a tweet, and we grab the first thing that comes out in a Google image search result.
And I feel very strongly about, I don't upload full resolution photos anywhere. I do sell full resolution photos to clients, and occasionally will donate them to friends or things like that who want to use them for artist photos. But like, full resolution photos are how I make my living. I'm perfectly happy to be a resource. That's just where my ethics are, but those photos are all sized for web and watermarked. And I'm happy to see them end up in a variety of different places. That's what they're there for. But even I have my limits,
Right, you can only do so much.
Yeah.
I would be remiss if I didn't ask you, what is your go-to camera? Like, I'm sure you have several, but what is your favorite?
So my digital camera right now is a Nikon D750. I also use a Polaroid SX70 sonar, and of course, the disposable cameras are very fun for me right now.
I was wondering if you're going to be in the Canon or the Nikon camp, and I'm sorry to hear that we're not of a like mind on this one.
Yeah, we can't share lenses.
I'm
That's
sorry.
A bummer. Oh, well.
I'm still on my first DSLR. It's a Canon Rebel T2i, and to be honest, I'm such a rank amateur that I have mostly just left it on the auto setting this whole time.
Hey, do what you need to do to get the pictures you want. I'm not here to judge. And the Rebels are a great series. Actually, when I was looking into getting my first camera, I considered getting a Rebel as well. It's just that the only reason I went Nikon is because I was able to find a deal on a more powerful camera for a better price. And so I went with that. Brand really does not matter.
Except that once you choose one, as you said, you generally have to stick with it due to the lenses.
Yes, unless you're particularly affluent, you're buying into a lens space. But other than that, both are professional brand quality cameras. There's nothing that puts you at an advantage except, sometimes the build of the camera is better. I waited a long time for something like the Nikon D750 to be produced. Canon had a way better, it's 5D. That is an excellent professional camera, and I was very envious of people who had them for a long time. But now that the D750 exists, I am so happy.
And if I had one of these cameras, whether it's better or more expensive than mine, or it's just whatever you use, I'm sure I would be able to take better photos than I do now, but I still wouldn't take as good photos as you, because as you said earlier, and as I wholeheartedly agree with, the hardware does not a photographer make. It is largely talent and experience, neither of which I, as far as I know, have. So help me out. What advice can you give somebody who, like me, who wants to take a better photo with the equipment they have now? Is there one or two pieces of advice that you can give?
Take more photos.
Take
Absolutely.
more photos, okay.
Yeah, just take lots and lots and lots of photos. But I'm someone who learns by doing. So the more effort I put into actually doing the activity of taking photos, the better I got. But there are also a lot of people who would tell you, take classes, read, look at video tutorials. I personally have not done as much of that as some others would like, probably. But I personally like to take action. I also strongly recommend finding other photographers you like and studying their work. Just looking and enjoying and seeing what you like about how people present color and shape and subject and framing. Like those were all very important things. And just like with drawing, very early in my time as a photographer, I imitated lots of other people's work. Always credit them as your source of inspiration so other people can enjoy and learn from them too. It's okay to be influenced by others. Just give appropriate credit where credit is due. But yeah, imitating other people's work helped me come a long way as well.
And I'm sure a lot of it is not just taking the photo, it's also editing the photo. I'm sure you don't send photos out the way you took them. You probably put them into Lightroom or Photoshop and do some touch-ups, right?
That's correct. I personally take a very minimalist approach to editing. I don't enjoy it very much, which is part of what I admire so much about Izzy Gramp's work. She's an incredible editor, and I'm always amazed by the level of patience and passion she has to like get her photos where she does, because I just don't have that energy. But I do at least some. I put my hands on all my photos for the most part, even if it's very slight and subtle.
I tend to do the same thing, not a lot of editing, just enough to correct any glaring errors or to improve the color balance if I was not,
Yeah, exactly.
Great. Well, we have talked about so much your experience with gaming and gaming culture and photography, social media, Patreon, mid-boss games. Is there anything that we've overlooked?
Nothing that I can think of, to be honest.
Playing any good games right now?
So, for my Games on Plane series, I've been working my way through Sword and Sorcery, which came out a long time ago, but I did not have an iOS device. It came out on iPad initially, and I couldn't afford one of those, but I finally have I have the big iPhone. I bought it on purpose, so that way I would enjoy playing games on it. And so I've been working my way through that. I'm also still working my way through Pokemon Sun, which is another one of my like weird little projects. Is that when I catch Pokemon, I like make little sound effects for what I think the Pokemon should sound like. So I've gotten the nickname the Pokemon Redubber, and there are more Pokemon redubs on the way. I'm still playing Pokemon. I just haven't had time while I've been traveling.
Can you give us an example of a Pokemon sound?
Oh my gosh. I could go into... Does Vine even still have these things in there? There's a draft. Let's see what this sounds like. Oh, here we go. They're all really weird. And I don't know why people like them so much, but I'm very thankful that they do.
And which Pokemon was that we just heard?
Oh, I'm so bad with the names of them. It's one that has like a little paintbrush for a tail and like a mop haircut. I make up my own names for the Pokemon. I can't remember what they are anymore.
Would that be a Smeargle?
Yes, it is a Smeargle.
Ah. Well, now I know what a Smeargle sounds like. Thank you.
At least in my strange interpretation.
Well, why don't we end on that high note and remind our listeners one more time where they can find you on the Twitters, on Patreon, etc.
Oh, yeah. So I do have a website. It's uglymachine.net, which points you to my Twitter and my Patreon, which is also Ugly Machine. Generally speaking, if you type Ugly Machine or EMiSpicer into Google, you will find the variety of websites that I am attached to. And my name is spelled EMiSpicer. And yes, Spicer is my actual last name. It's not a pen name.
And you are correct. You are the #1 Google hit for the individual words Ugly Machine. Well done.
Thank you. It turns out that if you use the same name for a long time, it'll go to you.
So you just have to have a couple of decades of experience behind you in order to get a top ranking on Google.
Yeah, just commit to something.
Oh,
and
that's
hope
easy.
it isn't extremely dated.
Excellent. Well, Emmy, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for having me. It was really great to get to be here.
This has been Polygamer, a Gamebits production. Find more episodes, read our blog, or send feedback at polygamer.net.